Commander Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the UES Defiance and watched the stars disappear one by one. Each light that went dark meant another human world had fallen to the Vaxery hegemony. The aliens had been conquering human space for 10 long years, and now only scattered groups of human ships remained to fight back against the massive alien fleet. Jake pressed his hand against the cold metal wall of his ship. The Defiance was one of the last human battleships still fighting. Her hull bore scars from dozens of battles, and her crew had not seen Earth in over 2 years. They were tired, running low on supplies and facing an enemy that seemed impossible to defeat. The communication system crackled to life. Lisa Rodriguez, Earth's chief military strategist, appeared on the main screen. Her face looked older than Jake remembered, with deep lines around her eyes that spoke of sleepless nights and impossible decisions. Behind her, he could see the emergency command center buried deep under the mountains of Colorado. "Jake, we just received the final ultimatum from the hegemony," Lisa said. Her voice was steady, but Jake could hear the tension underneath. "Admiral, the X-Car is giving us 72 hours to surrender completely, or they will destroy every human settlement in the galaxy." Jake felt his stomach drop. He had been expecting this moment for months, but hearing it still hit him like a physical blow. Around the bridge, his crew members looked at each other with grim faces. They all knew what complete surrender meant. The aliens would either kill them all or make them slaves. "How many ships do we have left?" Jake asked, though he already knew the answer would be bad. "Less than 200 combat vessels scattered across 12 systems," Lisa replied. "The hegemony has over 10,000 ships, all with technology far better than ours. Their shields can stop our best weapons, and their ships move faster than we can track." Jake nodded slowly. The numbers had been getting worse every month. For every alien ship humans destroyed, they lost 5 of their own. The hegemony had energy. Weapons that could cut through human armor like paper, and their shields made them almost impossible to hurt. Most battles ended with human ships running away or being destroyed. "What does the Galactic Council say?" Jake asked, though he expected no help from that direction either. Lisa's expression grew even more bitter. "They think we deserve this. Most of the galaxy sees humans as primitive barbarians who expanded too fast and too far. They believe the hegemony is just putting us back in our proper place." Jake understood the alien point of view even if he hated it. Humans had spread across the galaxy in just 300 years, settling on any world they could survive on. Other species took thousands of years to expand that far, moving slowly and carefully. To them, humans looked like dangerous animals that needed to be controlled. On his personal screen, Jake pulled up reports from across human space. The mining colonies in the Outer Rim had gone silent 3 days ago. New Detroit, humanity's largest industrial world, was surrounded by alien ships. Even the hidden bases in the asteroid fields were being hunted down one by one. Soon there would be nowhere left to run, but Lisa was not calling to discuss surrender. Jake could see something else in her eyes, a desperate kind of determination that he recognized from their academy days together. She had a plan, probably a crazy one that would get them all killed. "I'm calling an emergency meeting of all remaining human commanders," Lisa said. "We're going to coordinate one final operation. Not a retreat, not a hiding mission, but a real fight using every ship and every person we have left." Jake almost laughed. "Lisa, they outnumber us 50 to 1. Their technology is centuries ahead of ours. What can we possibly do that we haven't already tried?" "We stop fighting like them," Lisa said. "We stop trying to match their technology and their tactics. We start fighting like humans." Before Jake could ask what she meant, the communication ended. He stared at the blank screen for a long moment, then turned to look out at the stars again. More lights were disappearing as alien fleets moved through human space like a slow fire, burning away everything humans had built. His first officer, Lieutenant Sarah Kim, stepped up beside him. "Sir, what are your orders?" Jake thought about the 72-hour deadline. He thought about his crew, tired and scared, but still willing to follow him anywhere. He thought about Earth, the blue world where humanity first looked up at the stars and decided to make them home. "Set course for the rendezvous point," Jake said. And send a message to all human ships in this sector. Tell them it's time for humanity's last stand. As the Defiance turned toward its destination, Jake wondered if Lisa's plan could possibly work. But he also knew that surrender was not an option. Humans had always been fighters, even when the odds were impossible. If they were going to die, they would die fighting. The deadline was now 48 hours away, and across human space, the impossible was beginning to happen. Lisa Rodriguez's emergency meeting had lasted 16 hours, with ship commanders joining from hidden bases and mobile fleets scattered throughout the galaxy. What emerged from that meeting was not a traditional battle plan, but something entirely different. Captain Amy Foster guided her mining ship through the asteroid belt, her crew working frantically to complete modifications. That should have taken months. The heavy lifter had been designed to move rocks, not fight wars, but war was what they had now. Around her, dozens of other civilian ships were undergoing similar changes, turning cargo haulers and passenger transports into weapons of desperation. "Danny, how's the kinetic accelerator coming along?" Amy called to her chief engineer, Danny Kim, who was buried somewhere in the ship's machinery. "It's insane, but it might work," Danny's voice echoed from the engine room. "We're basically turning the whole ship into a giant railgun. We grab an asteroid, accelerate it using gravitational slingshots around 3 different planets, and launch it at near light speed toward the target." Amy shook her head. The plan sounded like something a child would dream up, not a real military strategy. But that was exactly what Lisa had told them to do. Stop thinking like professional soldiers and start thinking like desperate humans who would try anything to survive. The beauty of the kinetic accelerator was its simplicity. Hegemony energy shields could stop lasers, plasma bolts, and even nuclear explosions. But they were not designed to handle solid objects moving at incredible speeds. The aliens had never encountered an enemy primitive enough to throw rocks at them. Meanwhile, on Mars, Dr. Nathan Cross was pushing human science to its absolute limits. Project Wildcard was supposed to be impossible. Quantum-entangled communication devices that could send messages instantly across any distance had been theoretical for centuries. Now, with the galaxy's most advanced human scientists working around the clock, they were making it real. "The power requirements are beyond anything we've ever attempted," Nathan told his team as they assembled the first communication node. "We're going to burn out half our fusion reactors just to establish the network." His assistant, Dr. Helen Murphy, looked worried. "What if the system fails during combat? We'll lose all coordination between our forces." "Then we improvise," Nathan said, connecting the final quantum crystal to the device. "That's what humans do best." The quantum network was built from parts scavenged from destroyed alien ships, combined with human technology in ways that violated every engineering principle Nathan had learned. But it worked, creating an invisible web that would allow instant communication between human forces across light years of space, far from the main battle zones. The hegemony prepared for what they expected to be the final extermination of humanity. Admiral Vexkar reviewed his fleet positions from the bridge of his massive command ship. 10,000 vessels of incredible power, armed with weapons that could destroy planets and protected by shields that had never been breached. "The humans have rejected our surrender terms," his communications officer reported. "They sent a message saying we should come and take their worlds if we want them." Admiral Vexkar made a sound that might have been laughter if he had been human. "Primitive creatures. They still believe they can fight us with their crude weapons and outdated ships. We will teach the galaxy what happens to species that refuse to accept their proper place." He had studied human military tactics and found them predictably simple. They relied on brute force, overwhelming numbers, and weapons that were centuries behind hegemony technology. The few battles where humans had achieved victories were clear accidents, lucky strikes against damaged alien vessels or surprise attacks on supply convoys, but across human space, something unprecedented was taking shape. Instead of gathering their remaining ships into large fleets for traditional battles, humans were spreading out into thousands of small groups. Mining ships, passenger liners, cargo haulers, And even luxury yachts were being armed with whatever weapons could be found or improvised. Captain Steve Walsh sat in the command center of Europa Station, coordinating with civilian volunteers who had never fired a shot in anger. Many of them were old, some were barely adults, but all of them understood what surrender would mean. They were preparing to pilot their ships directly into alien vessels, turning themselves into guided missiles. "I know most of you have never been in combat," Steve told the volunteers. "But you have something the aliens don't understand. You have nothing left to lose and everything to fight for." The volunteers nodded grimly. They had watched their worlds burn, their families die, their entire civilization pushed to the edge of extinction. Fear was still there, but it was mixed with something the hegemony had never encountered in their previous conquests, the desperate fury of a cornered species. As the final hours ticked away, Danny Kim's underground facilities revealed their greatest secret. Hidden beneath the surface of New Detroit, human engineers had been working on weapons that should not exist. Not advanced technology or powerful energy weapons, but something far more disturbing: psychological warfare tools, designed to exploit the one advantage humans still possessed. Other species in the galaxy had evolved past their violent instincts, becoming civilized and peaceful over millions of years. Humans had kept their capacity for absolute brutality, their willingness to do whatever was necessary to survive. The new weapons would broadcast the sounds of dying crews, the screams of injured aliens, the chaos of ships being torn apart. It was uncivilized, primitive, and exactly what the situation required. When Admiral Vexcar received the final human response to his ultimatum, he almost deleted it without reading. But something made him pause and examine the message more carefully. It was not a formal military communication, but something that looked like it had been written by an angry child. "You want to fight us? Come and see what humans do when we have nothing left to lose." The admiral ordered his fleets to begin the final assault, confident that this would be over quickly. He had no way of knowing that humanity's last stand was about to become something that would shake the foundations of galactic civilization. The hegemony's massive fleet emerged from hyperspace around Earth, expecting to find desperate human defenders waiting in traditional battle formations. Instead, they found empty space. No grand fleet waited to meet them, no desperate last charge of human battleships trying to protect their homeworld. The silence was so complete that Admiral Vexcar began to wonder if the humans had already evacuated. Then the attacks began, and they came from directions the Admiral had never imagined. Small human ships appeared from behind asteroids, from within nebula clouds, from the shadow of planets where no military force should have been hiding. They struck fast and hard, not at the main fleet, but at supply ships, communication relays, and support vessels that were supposed to be safe. Commander Jake Morrison guided the Defiance through a field of space debris, using the wreckage of old battles to hide his ship's approach. His target was not one of the massive hegemony battleships, but a fuel tanker that was trying to resupply the alien fleet. Without fuel, even the most advanced ships were just expensive floating metal. "Fire. Everything we have," Jake ordered as his ship emerged from cover. The Defiance's weapons, enhanced with salvaged alien technology, tore through the tanker's hull before its shields could fully activate. The explosion lit up space for thousands of kilometers, and Jake was already leading his ship away before the enemy could respond across the galaxy. Similar attacks were happening simultaneously. Dr. Nathan Cross's quantum communication network allowed human forces to coordinate in ways the hegemony had never seen. While alien fleets were still receiving orders through normal communication channels that took hours to cross interstellar distances, humans could adjust their tactics instantly. Captain Amy Foster had positioned her modified mining ships throughout an entire star system, each one equipped with asteroids accelerated to impossible speeds. When the hegemony fleet arrived to secure what they thought was an abandoned system, they found themselves under bombardment from projectiles moving too fast to track and too primitive to trigger their advanced defense systems. "Target the command ship," Amy transmitted to her scattered fleet. "Remember, we don't need to destroy it, Just damage it enough to create chaos? The asteroid struck like the fist of an angry god, punching through energy shields that had never been designed to stop solid matter at relativistic speeds. The hegemony command vessel survived, but its communication array was destroyed, leaving the local fleet blind and unable to coordinate with other forces on Europa Station. Captain Steve Walsh watched as civilian volunteers launched their final attacks. The sight should have been tragic. Elderly humans in cargo ships, teenagers in racing vessels, families in passenger liners, all flying directly toward alien warships with no hope of survival. But the psychological impact on the hegemony forces was devastating. The aliens had never encountered an enemy willing to sacrifice everything for even the smallest tactical advantage. They watched in horror as humans rammed billion-credit vessels into alien hulls without hesitation, their final transmissions filled not with fear, but with defiant laughter and promises that more were coming. "They're insane," one hegemony captain transmitted to his fleet commander. "They're treating their own lives like ammunition." But the human attacks were not random suicide runs. Each volunteer had been given specific targets, specific objectives that would maximize the damage to alien operations. Communication hubs, shield generators, weapon control systems, all the vulnerable points that the hegemony had never bothered to protect because no civilized enemy would target them with kamikaze attacks. The breakthrough came when Danny Kim's psychological warfare weapons activated across the battlefield. The sounds of dying hegemony crews, broadcast on every frequency, filled alien communication channels with screams and panic. Most galactic species had not heard the sounds of violent death in centuries, and the psychological trauma was immediate. An overwhelming hegemony crews began requesting transfers away from the front lines. Some ships simply retreated without orders, their crews too traumatized to continue fighting. Admiral Vexcar found himself dealing with something no military academy had prepared him for, an enemy that fought without honor, without rules, without any regard for civilized behavior. "Sir, we're receiving reports of coordinated attacks across 17 different systems," his tactical officer reported. "The humans appear to have some form of instantaneous communication that allows them to strike simultaneously across impossible distances." Admiral Vexcar studied the tactical displays, trying to understand how a primitive species could coordinate such complex operations. His own forces were still relying on communication drones and hyperspace messages that took hours to deliver. Meanwhile, humans seemed to know about hegemony movements almost before his own commanders did. The most disturbing reports came from captured human prisoners. Under interrogation, they revealed a mindset that shocked their alien captors. These humans did not fight for conquest or glory or even survival in the traditional sense. They fought because they were angry, because they refused to accept defeat, because somewhere in their primitive brains was a switch that turned reasonable beings into absolute savages when threatened. "They keep saying the same thing," the interrogation officer reported to Admiral Vexcar, "that we made a mistake by not killing them all quickly. They claim that giving humans time to adapt was the worst tactical error we could have made." The admiral dismissed such threats as primitive bravado, but privately he was beginning to worry. His forces had expected to face desperate but predictable resistance. Instead, they were fighting an enemy that seemed to invent new tactics in real time, that treated military doctrine as mere suggestions, and that showed a creativity and violence that disturbed even experienced soldiers. Commander Morrison, now leading a growing fleet of captured alien vessels crewed by humans who had learned their systems through trial and error, struck at the heart of a hegemony staging area. His ships fought with a combination of advanced alien weapons and human unpredictability that proved devastatingly effective against their former owners. "They think like machines," Morrison transmitted to his mixed human and alien crew. "Logical, predictable, following rules that made sense when everyone fought the same way. But we don't fight the same way. We never have." As reports flooded in from across the battle zones, Admiral Vexcar began to realize that what was supposed to be humanity's extinction was turning into something entirely different. The humans were not just surviving, they were learning, adapting, and turning the galaxy's own infrastructure against its supposed masters. For the first time in his long military career, the admiral found himself considering a possibility that should have been impossible, that his forces might not win this war. 3 weeks after the deadline had passed, something impossible was happening across the galaxy. Humanity was supposed to be extinct, their worlds burned and their ships destroyed. Instead, reports reached the Galactic Council of Human Forces not just surviving, but expanding their territory. The species that should have been wiped out was somehow winning a war against the most powerful military alliance in known space. Captain Amy Foster stood on the bridge of her new flagship, a captured hegemony cruiser that her crews had learned to operate through sheer determination and reckless experimentation. Around her, the command crew was a mix of human miners, alien defectors, and prisoners of war who had chosen to join the human cause rather than face what their own forces had planned for conquered populations. "Ma'am, we're picking up distress signals from the New Geneva system," her communications officer reported. "Hegemony forces are requesting immediate evacuation from the planet's surface." Amy smiled grimly. New Geneva had been one of the first human colonies to fall to the aliens, its population enslaved or killed. Now the humans were coming back, and the occupying forces were discovering that ruling a human world was very different from conquering it. The liberation of New Geneva had begun not with a grand fleet battle, but with something far more terrifying to the occupying aliens. Human resistance fighters, thought to be dead or scattered, had emerged from hidden bunkers and underground facilities. They brought with them weapons cobbled together from mining equipment and alien technology, tactics learned from years of guerrilla warfare, and a burning hatred for the creatures who had destroyed their homes. "Set course for New Geneva," Amy ordered. "It's time to show the galaxy that humans don't abandon their own." Meanwhile, in the underground facilities of New Detroit, Danny Kim had achieved something that should have been impossible. His teams were now mass-producing hybrid technologies that combined human ingenuity with alien science in ways that violated every known law of engineering. Fusion reactors powered by alien crystals, kinetic weapons guided by hegemony targeting systems, and defensive shields that somehow worked despite being built from incompatible technologies. "The alien prisoners keep telling us these designs shouldn't work," Danny reported to Lisa Rodriguez during their daily briefing. "According to their science, half of our equipment should explode the moment we turn it on." Lisa examined the technical readouts with amazement. "But it does work." "That's the beautiful thing about being human," Danny grinned. "We don't know enough to understand why something is impossible, so we just build it anyway." The hybrid technologies were spreading throughout human space faster than the hegemony could adapt to them. Human engineers, freed from the constraints of alien scientific orthodoxy, were creating solutions that combine the best aspects of multiple technological traditions. Their weapons hit harder, their shields lasted longer, and their ships moved in ways that confused alien targeting systems. Dr. Nathan Cross had discovered something even more significant during his analysis of captured hegemony databases. The alien coalition's technological superiority was not the result of advanced research and development, but rather centuries of copying from an ancient alien repository they had discovered. They had become dependent on following predetermined designs rather than creating original solutions. "They've forgotten how to innovate," Nathan explained to the emergency council meeting. "For thousands of years, they've just been using variations of the same basic technologies. That's why our primitive solutions work so well against them. We're doing things they never thought to try." This revelation changed everything about how humans approached the war. Instead of trying to match alien technology piece by piece, they began developing entirely new approaches to problems the aliens thought they had solved perfectly. Human solutions were often crude, inefficient, and dangerous, but they were also completely unpredictable. Commander Jake Morrison, now commanding a fleet that included vessels from 6 different alien species, approached the hegemony's primary staging area. His combined human-alien crews had learned to fight with a coordination that amazed military observers throughout the galaxy. They combined human adaptability with alien technical knowledge, creating a fighting force unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. "All ships remember the plan," Morrison transmitted to his diverse fleet. "We're not trying to destroy their entire force, we just need to prove that they can be beaten." The battle that followed would be studied in military academies for centuries. Morrison's forces used tactics that combined traditional alien warfare with human innovation, creating confusion and chaos among the hegemony defenders. Ships that should have been destroyed limped away damaged but intact, their crews broadcasting surrender offers to any human forces that would accept them. Throughout the galaxy, member species of the Galactic Council watched in fascination and growing concern as reports continued to arrive. The humans were not just fighting back, they were demonstrating capabilities that challenged basic assumptions about warfare, technology, and civilization itself. On the hegemony flagship, Admiral Vexkar stared at tactical displays that no longer made sense. His forces, which had begun the campaign with overwhelming superiority, were now requesting reinforcements to deal with an enemy that should have been extinct. Supply lines were under constant attack, communication networks were compromised, and his officers were reporting equipment failures that seemed to have no logical explanation. "Sir, the humans appear to be using some form of quantum interference to disrupt our communication protocols," his chief scientist reported. "They're not just jamming our signals, they're actually feeding false information into our network." The Admiral realized with growing horror that the humans had somehow gained access to hegemony communication systems and were using them as weapons. False fleet movements, fake reinforcement schedules, and phantom enemy positions were causing his forces to waste resources chasing targets that did not exist. Captain Steve Walsh, now coordinating resistance activities across dozens of systems, smiled as he watched the chaos unfold. The quantum communication network that had started as a desperate attempt to coordinate human forces had evolved into something far more powerful. Humans were not just talking to each other instantly across impossible distances, they were also listening to alien communications and learning to manipulate them. "The beautiful thing about being underestimated," Steve told his staff, "is that nobody expects you to be capable of the impossible." The Galactic Council convened an emergency session as member worlds began questioning their support for the hegemony's actions. What had been presented as a simple police action against a primitive species was turning into a galactic conflict that threatened the stability of civilization itself. The humans, fighting for their very existence, had discovered capabilities they never knew they possessed. More importantly, they had shown the galaxy that advanced technology meant nothing without the will to use it creatively. As reports continued to arrive of impossible human victories, species throughout the galaxy began to realize that they had seriously underestimated the newest members of galactic civilization, Admiral Vexkar, facing the first real defeats of his career, began to understand that he was not fighting a conventional enemy. He was fighting a species that thrived on chaos, adapted to impossible circumstances, and refused to accept defeat even when facing overwhelming odds. For the first time, he began to consider the possibility that the hegemony might need to negotiate rather than simply demand surrender. The news spread across the galaxy like wildfire, transmitted through both official channels and underground networks that the authorities could not control. Humanity was winning. The species that was supposed to be extinct within 72 hours had not only survived, but was actually pushing back the most powerful military force in known space. What had started as an extermination campaign was becoming the greatest upset in galactic history. Captain Steve Walsh stood in the command center of the newly liberated New Geneva, watching as human civilians emerged from hiding places they had maintained for months. The planet's surface was scarred from the occupation, but the people were alive, and that was what mattered. Behind him, screens displayed tactical information from across human space, showing green zones where human forces had reclaimed their territory. "Sir, we're receiving surrender requests from hegemony garrisons on 12 different worlds," his communications officer reported. They're asking for safe passage off the planets in exchange for leaving all military equipment behind. Steve almost laughed at the irony. Months ago, it had been humans begging for mercy from overwhelming alien forces. Now the situation was reversed, and the psychological impact was spreading throughout the hegemony's military structure. Soldiers who had expected easy victories were facing an enemy that seemed to grow stronger with every battle dot in the underground. Factories of New Detroit. Danny Kim supervised the production lines that were now turning out hybrid technologies faster than anyone had thought possible. Human workers, many of them former miners and factory employees, operated machinery that combined alien precision with human adaptability. The resulting weapons and equipment should not have worked according to any known scientific principles, but they were proving devastatingly effective in combat. The alien engineers we captured keep insisting that our designs violate fundamental laws of physics, Danny reported to Lisa Rodriguez during their weekly briefing. They seem genuinely confused about how our equipment functions. Lisa studied the production reports with satisfaction. Maybe that's our real advantage? We don't know enough about their science to be limited by it. The revelation that human ignorance was actually a strength had profound implications for the war effort. While alien forces relied on technologies that had been perfected over millennia, following rigid design principles that could not be deviated from, humans were free to experiment with combinations that more advanced species would never consider. The results were often unstable and dangerous, but they were also completely unpredictable. Dr. Nathan Cross had made an even more significant discovery in the captured alien databases. The hegemony's entire technological civilization was built on a foundation of ancient, alien knowledge that they had been copying and modifying for thousands of years. They had become so dependent on following predetermined patterns that they had lost the ability to create truly original solutions. Look at this, Nathan showed Lisa a hologram displaying the evolution of hegemony weapons technology. For the past 3,000 years, every improvement has been a minor variation on the same basic design. They've optimized everything to perfection, but they can't adapt when something completely new appears. Lisa realized the implications immediately. That's why our primitive weapons work so well against them. We're doing things that their perfect systems were never designed to handle. Commander Jake Morrison, now leading the largest human fleet in history, prepared for what would become known as the Battle of Kepler station. The massive space platform had been a hegemony stronghold for decades, its defenses considered impregnable by conventional military forces. But humans had stopped fighting conventional battles months ago. All ships, remember that we're not trying to destroy the station, Morrison transmitted to his diverse fleet. We want to capture it intact and use it as a base for future operations. The battle that followed demonstrated the evolution of human warfare from desperate survival to sophisticated strategy. Morrison's forces used captured alien ships alongside human vessels, creating confusion among the defenders who could not distinguish friend from enemy until it was too late. The station's automated defenses, programmed to recognize specific ship configurations, were completely overwhelmed by the hybrid fleet attacking them throughout the galaxy. The Galactic Council struggled to understand what was happening. Member species that had supported the hegemony's actions were now questioning whether they had made a terrible mistake. Reports arriving from the war zone described human capabilities that challenged fundamental assumptions about technology, warfare, and civilization itself. The most disturbing reports came from hegemony prisoners who had been captured by human forces. Unlike other species that might execute or enslave captured enemies, humans seemed genuinely interested in learning from their prisoners. They studied alien technology not to copy it, but to understand its weaknesses and develop counters that no one had thought possible. They asked questions that don't make sense, one captured hegemony officer reported to his interrogators. They want to know why we build things the way we do, not how we build them. When we explain that something is impossible, they ask us to prove it. Admiral Vexkar received reports that his forces were not just losing battles, but were actually becoming afraid to engage human forces in combat. The psychological warfare campaigns had evolved beyond simple terror tactics to something far more sophisticated. Humans had learned to exploit the fact that most galactic species had not experienced real violence in centuries, making them extremely vulnerable to the kind of brutal warfare that humans considered normal. "Sir, we're receiving requests for transfer from over 30% of our combat crews," his personnel officer reported. "They're claiming medical necessity due to psychological trauma." The admiral understood the problem but had no solution for it. His forces had been trained to fight other civilized species that followed rules, used predictable tactics, and respected basic principles of warfare. Humans did none of these things, treating war as a problem to be solved rather than a ritual to be performed. Captain Amy Foster, now commanding a mixed fleet of human and captured alien vessels, demonstrated the new reality of galactic warfare. During the liberation of the industrial world of New Birmingham, instead of attempting a direct assault on the heavily fortified planet, her forces simply surrounded it and began broadcasting human music, human literature, and human philosophy to the population. The result was unprecedented in galactic history. The civilian population, mostly non-hegemony species that had been conquered years before, rose up against their occupiers after learning that resistance was possible. The hegemony garrison found itself fighting not just human forces from space, but rebellion from the very people they were supposed to be protecting. "This is what happens when you show people that the impossible is actually achievable," Amy transmitted to her fleet as they watched the planet liberate itself. "Sometimes the best weapon is hope." Dr. Cross's quantum communication network had evolved far beyond its original purpose. What had started as a desperate attempt to coordinate scattered human forces had become a galactic internet that allowed instantaneous communication across impossible distances. Species throughout the galaxy were beginning to access the network, sharing information and ideas at speeds that made traditional diplomacy obsolete. The psychological impact of this development was enormous. For the first time in galactic history, ordinary citizens could communicate directly with each other across species boundaries without government censorship or control. The result was a flowering of understanding and cooperation that undermined the hegemony's narrative about human primitiveness and danger. As reports continued to arrive of human victories across multiple fronts, Admiral Vexkar faced the unthinkable reality that his forces might actually lose this war. The species he had expected to exterminate in less than 3 days had fought his alliance to a standstill, and was now pushing back with weapons and tactics that seemed to come from fevered nightmares rather than military academies. But the most shocking revelation was yet to come, as intelligence reports began to reveal the true scope of human capabilities and their implications for the future of galactic civilization. The war ended not with a great battle or dramatic confrontation, but with a simple message transmitted across every communication channel in the galaxy. Admiral Vexkar, his once mighty fleet reduced to half its original strength and facing supply shortages that made continued fighting impossible, requested terms of surrender from the species he had planned to exterminate just 6 months earlier. Commander Jake Morrison received the surrender aboard his flagship, a vessel that perfectly represented the new reality of galactic civilization. The ship's hull was human-built. Its weapons were a mixture of technologies from 8 different species, and its crew included beings from across the galaxy who had chosen to fight alongside humanity rather than against it. The ceremony was broadcast to billions of viewers who watched in amazement as the impossible became reality. "On behalf of the Vaxri hegemony, I formally surrender our forces and request terms." Admiral Vexkar spoke the words he had never imagined he would need to say. "We acknowledge that humanity has proven its right to exist and to hold its place among the civilized species of the galaxy." Morrison, standing in the conference room where human and alien representatives would negotiate the future, felt the weight of history on his shoulders. "The terms are simple, Admiral. Withdrawal of all hegemony forces from human space, recognition of human sovereignty over our worlds, and participation in a new galactic government where no single alliance can threaten the existence of entire species. The Galactic Council, meeting an emergency session, faced a complete restructuring of interstellar politics. Member species that had initially supported the hegemony's actions now rushed to distance themselves from what was being called the greatest military disaster in recorded history. More importantly, they were forced to acknowledge that their understanding of intelligence, technology, and warfare had been fundamentally wrong. Lisa Rodriguez, now serving as humanity's first galactic ambassador, addressed the assembled representatives with words that would reshape diplomatic relations for generations. We didn't fight this war because we wanted to conquer anyone or prove our superiority. We fought because we refused to accept extinction. Now that we've proven our right to exist, we want to help build a galaxy where no species ever faces that choice again. The establishment of the new galactic government was unlike anything in recorded history. Instead of being based on technological advancement or military power, it was founded on principles of adaptability, innovation, and mutual cooperation. Humanity was offered not just membership, but a leadership position that recognized their unique approach to problem solving. Captain Amy Foster established the first human defense academy on Mars, where officers from dozens of species came to study the unconventional warfare tactics that had defeated the galaxy's most powerful military alliance. Her asteroid bombardment techniques became standard doctrine, taught alongside human philosophies of creative destruction and adaptive strategy. The most important lesson, Amy told her mixed-species students, is that there is no such thing as an impossible situation. There are only situations that require solutions nobody has thought of yet. Dr. Nathan Cross led the formation of the Interspecies Technology Exchange, where human engineers worked with alien scientists to develop solutions that neither could achieve alone. The quantum communication network that had coordinated humanity's defense became the foundation for a new galactic internet that revolutionized interstellar civilization by allowing instantaneous communication across any distance. The beautiful thing about working with humans, explained Dr. Vextel, a hegemony scientist who had defected during the war, is that they don't know what's supposed to be impossible. When we tell them something can't be done, they ask us to explain why, and then they find ways around our explanations. The technological revolution that followed humanity's victory transformed every aspect of galactic life. Fusion reactors that ran on impossible power combinations, transportation systems that ignored conventional physics and communication networks that connected minds as well as machines, all developed through the combination of human creativity and alien knowledge. Captain Steve Walsh, now coordinating the integration of former hegemony worlds into the new galactic government, watched as species that had been enemies for centuries began working together on projects that benefited everyone. The psychological barriers that had divided the galaxy for millennia were breaking down as beings learned to think like humans, treating problems as challenges to be solved, rather than limitations to be accepted. What we've discovered, Steve reported to the Galactic Council, is that most species stopped innovating thousands of years ago because they achieved technological perfection within their limited understanding. Humans never had that luxury. We had to keep adapting or die, so we never lost the ability to see new possibilities. Danny Kim's underground facilities had evolved into the galaxy's premier research and development centers, where the impossible became routine and the innovative became standard. Former hegemony engineers worked alongside human miners and alien scientists, creating technologies that challenged the fundamental laws of physics and succeeded anyway. The integration process was not without its challenges. Many species struggled to understand human approaches to problem solving, while humans had to learn that not every solution required breaking existing rules. But the results spoke for themselves. A galaxy that had been stagnant for millennia was suddenly buzzing with new ideas, new technologies, and new possibilities. The establishment of joint human-alien colonies throughout the galaxy represented the final transformation of interstellar civilization. On these worlds, species that had once viewed humans as primitive barbarians now sought to learn from their adaptability and innovation. Children grew up speaking multiple languages, thinking in multiple paradigms, and approaching problems with a creativity that amazed their elders. Admiral Vexkar, now serving as an advisor to the new galactic government, reflected on the lessons learned from humanity's impossible victory. We made the mistake of believing that superior technology guaranteed superior results. What we learned is that intelligence without adaptability is just another form of limitation. The story concluded with a ceremony marking the 5th anniversary of humanity's last stand, held on Earth in a city rebuilt using technologies that combine the best of human and alien science. Representatives from across the galaxy gathered to commemorate not just a military victory, but the birth of a new era in galactic civilization. As Jake Morrison, now serving as the Director of Galactic Defense, addressed the assembled crowd. His words summarized the transformation that had shocked the galaxy and changed the course of history. We fought not because we were the strongest or the smartest or the most advanced. We fought because we were human, and humans don't know how to give up. Today, the galaxy is a better place not because we conquered our enemies, but because we taught them that the impossible is just another word for something nobody has figured out how to do yet. The galaxy had learned that when you corner humanity, you don't get surrender. You get innovation, determination, and the kind of fighting spirit that turns certain defeat into legendary victory. Most shocking of all, they learned that humans fight hardest not when they have everything to gain, but when they have everything to lose, and that this seemingly primitive trait might be the most valuable quality any species could possess in an uncertain universe.